Reprise du débat.
Resuming debate.
Sherwood, the honourable member for Sherwood Park, Sherwood, Saskatchewan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And members of this House know, as I've mentioned before, that my grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, so I am particularly honoured to be speaking strongly today against contemporary discrimination against the Jewish people. I am very proud to be a Zionist defined originally as someone who supported the reestablishment and now as someone who supports the development and protection of a Jewish nation called Israel. There is, for me, an important connection between remembering the lessons of the Holocaust and supporting the modern Jewish state of Israel. Zionism began at the end of the 19th century, but support for Zionism was not a slam dunk, even within the Jewish community. Some liberal-minded Jews perceived, in fact, a tension between the call for a separate Jewish state on the one hand and the demand for full Jewish equality within existing European states on the other. They saw the call for a separate Jewish homeland as contrary to their project of seeking integration and assimilation. But the terrible experience of European Jews during the Second World War demonstrated for most Jews and most non-Jews alike the need for a Jewish homeland. As much as Jews everywhere continued to seek full acceptance in nations where they lived outside of Israel, the opportunity to go to an ethnic and religious homeland provided them and provides them with vital security. If and when things go badly, Jews always have somewhere to go. This wasn't the case at the time of the Holocaust. My grandmother was part of a mixed family. They were only able to obtain one visa, so her father, the full-blood Jew in the family, left for South America. But my grandmother and her mother had to stay behind without him. And we all know the tragic case of the St. Louis, a boat carrying Jewish refugees from Germany, which Mackenzie King refused to allow into Canada. Noting this experience, Mr. Speaker, Jews have rightly reasoned that as much as they can hope for goodwill from other nations where they live, they cannot always depend on it. Israel not only has a right to exist, Israel's existence is necessary. Necessary because without it, Jews will not have the security that comes with knowing that worst come to worst, they always have somewhere to go. Now, despite some dark moments, Canada and Israel have had a strong partnership, and certainly we have much in common. Of course, we disagree on some things. It is a misconception that those of us who are Zionists always agree with policies of the Israeli government. As the member for Calgary Heritage has said, of course, like any country, Israel may be subjected to fair criticism. And like any free country, Israel subjects itself to such criticism. Healthy, necessary, democratic debate. Mr. Speaker, that self-criticism is part of what makes Israel a great nation. Vibrant, open debate about politics between people of different philosophies and from widely varying religious traditions. In Israel, the only liberal democracy in the Middle East, all citizens are able to run for government, to attend university, to hold any job, to sit on the Supreme Court, to represent their country on the international stage, just as Canadians are. Israelis, just like Canadians, can aspire to any goal and are free to work to achieve it. Frankly, Israel's Muslim population enjoy more economic, political, and religious freedom than do Muslim populations in many neighboring Muslim-majority states. Now, Canada and Israel have much in common. We are vibrant democracies, we value multiculturalism, we protect the rights of all citizens, and we enjoy robust democratic debate in two official languages. For us, English and French, for them, Hebrew and Arabic. With these traits in common, it is natural for Canada and Israel to have a very strong bond. Like Israel, Canada has spoken out in the past about global anti-Semitism, and we must do so again. Let us be clear, anti-Semitism and racism almost never identify themselves as such, but a movement that calls for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, not on the basis of actions, views, or words of the individuals facing the boycott, but on the basis of national origin alone. This is clearly an example of anti-Semitic racism. And we have an obligation to speak out. Not only to speak out in support of a friend, but to take a principled stand on something that runs counter to our deeply held values of diversity and inclusion. Now, we are fortunate to live in a country where we do not face discrimination. on the basis of things like religion, sex, age, or ethnic or national origin. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms entrenches this fact, that everyone is equal under Canadian law. This section of the Charter reflects our deepest held values. People should not face discrimination, again, on the basis of religion or of ethnic or national origin. But the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Movement, or BDS, advocates for actions that run entirely contrary to these Canadian values. They advocate discrimination against individuals and businesses on the basis of national origin. BDS openly calls for discrimination against and boycotts of Israeli individuals, artists, companies, organizations, academics, universities, research institutions, hospitals, and technology and development projects, again, simply because they are Israeli. BDS advocates for discrimination against those who happen to be Israelis and also against Canadians who hold dual Canadian-Israeli citizenship. BDS seeks to discriminate against individuals for no reason other than the passport that they hold. George Santayana said, "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it." And boycotts against Jews have occurred throughout history, based on lies and misinformation and on prejudicial assumptions. And we are now seeing boycotts against the world's only Jewish state and against all citizens of that Jewish state. Is it plausible that this is really simply about a political statement, or isn't it obvious that this is about something much darker than political disagreement? BDS does not advocate peace between Israeli Jews and Palestinians. On this side of the House, we support negotiations between Israeli and Palestinian leaders, and we support a two-state solution. But instead of trying to bring people together and support meaningful collaboration, BDS seeks to silence dialogue and once again single out Jews and Israelis for ill treatment. These actions do not contribute to peace, they only drive people further apart. Now, this motion is one that I would have hoped would receive unanimous support from the House. And I am frankly perplexed by the fact that some members seem to be opposing it. The best that we hear from those who are disinclined to support this motion is reference to freedom of speech. But, Mr. Speaker, it certainly does not restrict anyone's freedom for this House to express its support for our collective values of tolerance and inclusion, and to express our opposition to discrimination on the basis of national origin. You may recall that in 2010, Maclean's magazine ran a cover story calling Quebec Canada's most corrupt province. This House responded by unanimously passing a motion which expressed, quote, its profound sadness at the prejudice displayed and stereotypes employed by Maclean's magazine to denigrate the Quebec nation, its history, and its institutions. Earlier in 2006, the Globe and Mail published a story about the shooting at Montreal's Dawson College, in which the author suggested that the province's history of linguistic strife contributed to the incident. Following that, the House again unanimously passed a motion, quote, that in the opinion of the House, an apology be given to the people of Quebec for the offensive remarks of Ms. Jan Wong in a Globe and Mail article regarding the recent Dawson College tragedy. In these instances, members of all parties did not have a problem understanding that the House can express its opinion without limiting free and robust debate. As we must ask in all of these cases, why treat Israel differently? Now, Mr. Speaker, the collaboration between Canada and Israel benefits all of us. Just this past weekend, my daughter Gianna and I assembled our new SodaStream machine. SodaStream has a plant in Israel which provides good, well-paying jobs to both Israelis and Palestinians. So let's stand today against racism and anti-Semitism. Let's stand in support of tolerance and inclusion, and also in support of delicious fizzy drinks. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments?
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your statements this afternoon. I want to say that we are not here debating whether we recognize whether the legitimacy of the State of Israel. This is something that we all truly believe in. But my question to the member is that he spoke about healthy, necessary, and democratic debate which exists in Israel and in Canada. As such, I ask the member to define what any and all attempts means, and if this part of the motion impedes healthy, necessary, and democratic debate in the promotion of peace.
Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, I think the motion is quite clear, and the rules of the House with respect to motions are quite clear in this sense as well. We are not legislating as part of this debate today. We are not making any kind of change that would limit people's ability to speak freely. We, as a party, are asking this House to express strongly its opinion about an issue of our collective values. And as I've illustrated, the House has not had a problem doing this before. In 2 cases, the House has unanimously expressed its disagreement with some of Canada's most prominent publications, in one case the Globe and Mail, in one case Maclean's Magazine. So if this House in those instances does not have a problem expressing its opinion without limiting freedom of speech, but expressing its opinion about issues which are important in terms of our collective values as a nation, then let's be consistent. Let's do it in this case as well. Because if the House isn't willing to pass this motion unanimously, I would have to ask again, what makes Israel different?
Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments.
For Timmins, James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's really not much point engaging Conservatives on this issue because they take the crisis of trying to find peace between Israel and Palestine and traditionally and habitually use it as a wedge issue. But what came up this morning is that we're being asked in this House to use the power of Parliament to condemn individuals for their right to dissent from the Conservative worldview. And that was made clear when the Conservatives attacked the leader of the New Democratic Party for failing to condemn a demonstration outside his office. Well, I sat this morning reading the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the right to picket outside MPs' offices. That is a fundamental right. So when my colleagues in the Conservative Party are asking us to condemn individuals for their right to dissent, I am absolutely shocked and appalled that the Liberal Party, the party of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, would go along with them because they are playing into the Conservative continual attempt to wedge and divide Canadians. And I want to ask my colleagues, how could we stand up and say we're going to support academic freedom when we would use the House of Commons to condemn individual students for participating in debates about foreign policies in another country? What kind of Parliament are we going to be if we're not going to be some kind of monkey house for Conservative ideology? If we're not willing to stand up on the right to dissent, the right to protest, the right to engage in discussion about what is good policy in another country. If we are not willing to stand up for that, Mr. Speaker, then this House is a much shabbier place as a result of these really, really distasteful wedge issues. And I'm looking at the Liberal Party and thinking, my God, are you going to go along with them one more time, just like you did on Bill C-51? Show some backbone. Stand up to this kind of game playing.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Quite frankly, it's disappointing to hear the honourable member say that he is not interested in engaging this conversation with those of us over here. Of course, we have a very different worldview, but I respect the member, and I think he should respect us to really see the value of, at the very least, having this conversation. This is not about a wedge issue. We want members in other parties to support this motion. Frankly, I think this should be a consensus issue. But if there are those that wish to vote against it, of course, they have to give account for that decision. Now, it's very inconsistent, though, for members of the New Democratic Party, because I remember in 2010, the leader of the New Democratic Party in particular taking great umbrage with a cover on Maclean's Magazine that I referred to talking about Quebec, and a unanimous motion of this House expressing its opinion about that cover. The member should explain why it is okay for the House to express its opinion on issues like that, but somehow when it comes to Israel, the House should just not express its opinion. Well, when we see things that go directly against our collective values, we have to take a strong position. The House should not limit freedom of speech, but should express strongly its opposition to this racist.
Resuming debate.